On a quiet autumn morning, a little girl stood barefoot outside a bakery, her small voice trembling as she whispered, "I'll trade my coat for that cake." Inside, a man who thought he had lost everything looked up, and in that instant his world stopped. When her sleeve slipped back and revealed a tiny crescent-shaped mark on her arm, memories he had buried came rushing back. It was the same mark his missing daughter once had. Suddenly, this wasn't just a hungry child in the cold. This was a chance at a miracle, a reminder that sometimes love finds its way back when we least expect it. If this story touches your heart, stay with us. There's more to uncover, and every moment will remind you of the power of hope. Subscribe now to Hidden Echo Stories so you never miss the miracles waiting to be told. Ryan Mitchell had built towers of glass that touched the sky, buildings that earned him awards and admiration, but none of it could fill the silence in his heart. On that October morning in Asheville, the city seemed almost too picturesque. Golden leaves littered the sidewalks, crisp air carried the scent of cinnamon from corner cafes, and joggers passed with the carefree rhythm of people who had never lost everything. Yet Ryan noticed none of it. He sat slouched in his luxury SUV, staring blankly at the steering wheel, the weight of an unopened award box pressing into the leather seat behind him. He had received it the night before, a symbol of a legacy he no longer cared about. The messages of congratulations, the reminders of important meetings, even the Rolex ticking on his wrist, every detail of his life felt hollow, like an echo fading into an empty room. He pushed open the car door and stepped into the brisk air, his breath forming a cloud that vanished almost instantly. The sound of leaves crunching underfoot brought back faint memories, the kind he did not welcome anymore. He crossed the street toward a small bakery that most people might ignore. Its faded yellow awning and weathered brick walls did not look remarkable, but when he pushed the door open, the warmth of bread and sugar wrapped around him like a forgotten embrace. He ordered a black coffee and a slice of chocolate cake, though he had no appetite. Sitting by the window, he watched the sunlight cast sleepy stripes across the table. For a moment, he thought maybe the coffee would steady the ache inside his chest. He lifted the cup halfway when the bell above the door jingled again. He almost did not look. Most days, he avoided the world, slipping past strangers without truly seeing them. But something in the shift of air, a sudden chill that cut through the bakery's warmth, made him glance toward the entrance. That was when he saw her. She could not have been more than 6 years old. A small, fragile figure framed in the doorway, barefoot despite the cold pavement outside. Her red coat, 2 sizes too big, dragged along the floor as though she was disappearing into it. Her hair hung in uneven curls and her pale face carried traces of dirt. Yet her eyes, those wide, searching eyes, were fixed not on the people in the room but on the glass display of pastries. Ryan felt his chest tighten. There was something unbearably quiet about the way she moved, like someone accustomed to going unnoticed. The barista hesitated, unsure if she should intervene. The girl was not loud, not disruptive, just hungry. Then without hesitation she walked straight to his table. Ryan blinked, uncertain if he was imagining it. She stood there, small hands hidden in the sleeves of her oversized coat, her gaze locked on the cake before him. Her voice was no more than a whisper, fragile enough to be lost in the clatter of cups and low hum of conversation. "Sir, I will trade my coat for that cake." The fork slipped from Ryan's hand, clattering against the plate. He stared at her, his breath caught in his throat. Her feet were blue with cold, her cheeks hollow in a way no child should ever be. He opened his mouth, but before words could form, she lifted her hand to point at the slice of cake. The sleeve slid back, revealing the pale curve of her arm. And there it was, etched into her skin, a faint crescent, no bigger than a coin. Time fractured. The bakery blurred around him. He could hear only the thunder of his heartbeat in his ears. That mark, that impossible, familiar mark. His daughter Harper had carried the same one, in the exact same place. The child he had not spoken of in nearly 3 years, the one whose name felt too heavy to utter, whose absence had hollowed out his life. He stared until his vision blurred. The coffee cup tipped, spilling across the table, dark liquid soaking the napkin beneath it. The plate cracked and shattered on the floor, yet Ryan did not move. The girl flinched but did not run. Her eyes, piercing, ocean blue, met his, and he was lost. It was as if the universe had reached back into his chest and pulled out a memory he had tried so hard to bury. "That mark," he whispered, his voice fractured, trembling, "that is my daughter's." The little girl tilted her head, not understanding the storm she had awakened inside him. She had no idea that in a single glance, she had reignited a hope he thought had died long ago. She slid quietly into the chair across from him, folding her legs beneath her as if afraid to take up space. Ryan pushed the plate toward her with both hands, terrified that if he looked away she might vanish. She hesitated only a second before taking the fork. Her small fingers wrapped around it clumsily, and she lifted the first bite of chocolate cake with a reverence that broke him. Her face lit up after that first taste, as if warmth itself had returned to her body. "It is good," she mumbled through her mouthful, her voice bright and fragile all at once. Ryan could not speak. He watched her, every gesture a haunting echo of Harper. The way she tilted her head when chewing, the faint dimple that appeared when she swallowed, the swing of her legs that barely reached the edge of the chair. Each movement unraveled him further. He finally found his voice. "Do you live nearby?" he asked, trying to steady his tone. She nodded, pointing vaguely through the window. "Uncle Wee says it is not far, but it feels far when it is cold." Her words struck him like a blade. There was someone else, an uncle, an aunt perhaps. She was not alone, and yet her bare feet told another story. "What is your name?" he asked softly. "Stella," she whispered. The name rolled painfully off his lips when he repeated it. Stella, a name that was not Harper but somehow carried the same fragile beauty. He looked at her again, and the thought pulsed like a prayer in his chest. Could it be? Could she have survived, been hidden, renamed? Ryan's throat tightened as she took another bite, frosting smearing across her sleeve. She looked up at him, tilting her head in quiet curiosity. "You look kind of sad," she said simply. He let out a broken laugh. "Yes," he admitted, "I suppose I am." "Why?" she asked. He looked away, unable to explain the years of grief, the endless nights replaying the moment he lost Harper. He could not tell her that he had stopped believing in miracles long ago. And yet, sitting across from her, he felt something stir in his chest, a flicker of something that might have been hope. As her sleeve slipped again, revealing the crescent birthmark, Ryan's pulse raced. He remembered Harper's little voice, telling him once that her moon made her special, that it made her magic. And now here was this child, Stella, repeating the same unspoken melody of his past. Ryan swallowed hard. This was not just chance. This was the beginning of something impossible. And deep down, though he barely dared to admit it, he knew his life had just changed forever. Ryan Mitchell did not sleep that night. Long after the girl had vanished from the bakery with only a whispered goodbye, his mind spun like a storm he could not calm. He had walked back to his penthouse in a haze, but when he opened the cedar chest in his closet, the truth burned brighter than denial. Photographs, drawings, keepsakes of Harper filled the box, and one picture in particular left him trembling. In it, his daughter beamed with her arms outstretched, proudly showing off the same crescent birthmark that he had just seen on the girl's arm. He pressed the photograph to his lips, whispering, "It has to be her." Sleep never came, only the pounding certainty of a father who had glimpsed a miracle. By dawn, resolve replaced exhaustion. Ryan had made countless decisions that shaped skylines, but none as heavy as this. He picked up his phone, scrolled through old contacts, and pressed a number he had not used in years. When the familiar gravelly voice of Leonard Walters answered, Ryan did not hesitate. "I need you," he said. "I think I found her." The following morning, Ryan parked outside the bakery again, clutching a coffee he could not bring himself to drink. He waited, staring at the door, every second stretching. The barista confirmed what he feared and hoped all at once. Yes, the little girl came often. No, she never bought anything. Sometimes she lingered by the laundromat across the street. Ryan's chest tightened as he thanked her, then crossed the road to watch the crumbling apartment buildings. He waited, the minutes dripping slow, until at last she appeared. Stella. Her red coat fluttered as she stepped from a narrow alleyway, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. Her socks did not match, her sandals were too large, her hair tied back with a piece of yarn. She moved with the cautious rhythm of someone who had already learned how to survive the cold. Ryan raised his binoculars from the car. His heart twisted as he watched her sit on the rusted staircase and begin drawing shapes in the dirt with a stick. Lines turned into circles, then into three figures beneath what looked like a tree. His breath caught. She was remembering something. Maybe someone. A door opened and a woman stepped out carrying a garbage bag. Her face was drawn, her uniform marked with exhaustion. Yet when she saw Stella, her expression softened with genuine love. The girl ran into her arms and Ryan felt a strange mixture of relief and despair. At least she had someone. At least she was not entirely alone. Still, he could not ignore the scream that rang minutes later, sharp and unsettling, followed by the staggering figure of a man whose presence reeked of danger. Ryan's body tensed with rage, every instinct demanding he act. But he held back. Not yet. He needed more than anger, he needed answers. He snapped a photo, sent it to Leonard, and asked for a full background check. Then he sat alone, staring at the building that housed the life his daughter had been forced to live, his hands clenched with silent resolve. That evening, Ryan filled a grocery basket with food, clothes, and small comforts. He added a yellow scarf, soft as sunlight, because some part of him knew she deserved brightness in a world that had offered so little. Hours later, he knocked at the door of apartment 2C, his heart pounding. Darcy, the weary woman from earlier, opened the door with suspicion. She resisted his offer of groceries, but Stella's voice called from inside, curious and hopeful, and eventually the door opened wider. The apartment was modest, worn but tidy. Stella's face lit up when she saw him, as if she had been waiting. She ran toward him, stopping just short of an embrace, glancing back for permission. Ryan knelt, pulled the yellow scarf from the bag, and placed it gently around her shoulders. "For when it gets cold again," he whispered. Her eyes widened with delight, and she draped it across herself like royalty. Ryan swallowed hard, hiding the swell of emotion in his chest. Darcy remained guarded, her arms crossed, her gaze sharp. "Help means different things to different people," she said, voice edged with distrust. Ryan nodded, understanding more than she realized. He placed the groceries on the counter and prepared to leave, but Stella tugged at his sleeve. She held out a crayon drawing three figures under a tree. A tall man, a woman with her hair in a bun, and a small girl in a red coat with a yellow scarf. Above them she had scrawled in shaky letters, "Me, Aunt Darcy, Cake Man." Ryan nearly broke apart as he took it in his trembling hands. Back in his car, he sat in silence, smoothing the drawing again and again. His phone buzzed with reminders of meetings across the world, Tokyo, London, New York, but none of it mattered. He canceled everything. For the first time in years, work was irrelevant. Only this child mattered. In the days that followed, Ryan returned to the bakery at dawn. Each morning, Stella appeared wrapped in the yellow scarf, sometimes barefoot, sometimes with shoes too big, always carrying a quiet light that pierced the walls around his heart. She asked him questions that made him laugh in spite of himself. Do muffins have birthdays? Why do some clouds look sad? She never asked who he was, and he did not push. Their time together was fragile, too sacred to rush. Still, the signs multiplied. One morning she handed him a golden leaf shaped like a fan. "This matches my tree," she said softly. "The one in my dreams." Ryan felt his chest tighten. He asked her what happened in the dream, and she described a bench beneath the tree, a man with warm hands who smelled like wood and mint. Ryan froze, his throat closing. She was describing him. He brought her small gifts, a notebook, star stickers, a thermos of cocoa. She clutched each one with reverence as if they were treasures beyond measure. When she placed the stickers on her ceiling, she whispered that she would see the stars even with her eyes closed. Ryan could not hide the tears then. Every gesture, every word, Every drawing pulled him deeper into certainty. When Stella drew 3 figures holding hands under a golden sky and titled it "The Day I Got Warm Again," Ryan wept openly. He hugged her gently, and for the first time she leaned into him instead of pulling away. That night he sat with her drawing beside Harper's from years ago. Both pictures showed a tree, a bench, 3 figures, and a moon. The same crooked trunk, the same details, the same unshakable truth. He called Leonard that evening, voice steady with desperation. He needed proof, DNA. It felt invasive, but it was the only way. Days later, he plucked a strand of hair from her stuffed giraffe, Rosie, the very same toy Harper once held in childhood photos. He sent it to Leonard with trembling hands, then waited. When the results came back, the call was short but life-altering. "Ryan, it is her. 99.9% match. Stella is Harper." The world went silent. He sank into a chair, staring at the skyline he had helped design, a skyline that suddenly meant nothing compared to the truth that his daughter was alive. The grief that had chained him for years broke, replaced by an overwhelming flood of love and fury. Someone had hidden her. Someone had let him believe she was gone, and now nothing would stop him from bringing her back into his arms where she belonged. Ryan's hands shook as he climbed the staircase to apartment 2C. The DNA results still echoed in his mind with unbearable clarity. 99.9%. There was no doubt, no room for disbelief. Stella was Harper. His daughter had been alive all along, living behind peeling wallpaper and rusted railings while he drowned in grief. He could barely breathe as he knocked on the faded green door. Darcy answered, her eyes wary. She looked at him like she already knew why he was there. Ryan stepped inside, his voice raw. "She is my daughter. I had her tested. There is no mistake." He held up the envelope as if it were a weapon, as if the truth itself might shatter the fragile walls of that small apartment. Darcy's face drained of color. She whispered that they had found the girl during a flood, clinging to life near a storm drain, too weak to speak. She said the child had called her Auntie and had never given another name. Ryan's jaw clenched as she explained they never went to the authorities because they feared losing her. "You thought you were protecting her." His voice was low, dangerous. "I was protecting her," Darcy insisted, her eyes filling with tears. She was terrified. She clung to me like I was the only safe thing in her world. I could not give her up. Ryan's heart raged, torn between fury and gratitude. He wanted to scream at her for stealing years from him, for letting him mourn his daughter as if she were dead. Yet as he glanced toward the small table where Stella sat coloring, he felt the undeniable truth. Darcy had kept her alive, cared for her when the world had abandoned her. Before he could respond, the door banged open. We stumbled in, smelling of alcohol, his voice slurred with anger. "You again," he spat. "She is ours now. You cannot take her." Ryan's body went rigid. He had never been a man of violence, but at that moment he felt every muscle coil like a spring. Stella appeared in the doorway, confusion clouding her innocent eyes. "Why are you yelling?" she asked softly. Ryan dropped to his knees before her, his voice cracked with emotion. "Sweetheart, no one is yelling at you, I promise." His eyes burned as he pulled a worn photograph from his pocket, showing a younger Harper smiling in his arms. "Do you know who this is?" he asked. Stella stared at the picture. For a long moment she was silent, then her voice trembled. "I think that is me." Tears blurred Ryan's vision. "Your name is Harper," he whispered. "That is what I called you. You are my little girl." Her lips parted in wonder. "I had another name." "Yes," Ryan said, choking on the word. "A beautiful name, Harper." She stepped closer, hesitant, her small hand reaching out to touch his. "Are you my first dad?" His breath hitched. He could not speak. He could only nod. And when she wrapped her arms around his neck, he held her as though he would never let go again. The dam inside him broke, years of silence and sorrow flooding out as he wept into her tangled curls. Behind them, Darcy sank onto the couch, her shoulders shaking with guilt and exhaustion. We muttered angrily before storming out, slamming the door behind him. The sound barely registered. All Ryan could hear was the fragile voice calling him Dad for the very first time. The days that followed were unlike anything he had expected. There was no courtroom drama, no legal battle waged across headlines. Instead, there were long nights around Darcy's kitchen table, three broken adults facing an impossible truth. Darcy finally admitted through tears that Stella deserved to know her origins, to know both love and truth. After hours of talking, they reached an agreement. For now, Stella would split her time, weekdays with Darcy, weekends with Ryan. No lawyers, no fighting, just healing. Ryan poured himself into preparing for those weekends. The sterile guest room in his penthouse transformed into something radiant. He painted the walls a pale yellow, soft and warm like morning light. He strung a galaxy projector across the ceiling, tiny stars swirling above the bed. Shelves filled with children's books and sketchpads lined the walls. On the bed, waiting silently, sat Rosie the giraffe, freshly stitched, her missing button eye carefully replaced. Every detail carried meaning. Every detail whispered, "This space has been waiting for you." The first weekend Stella arrived, she stepped inside with cautious curiosity. She clutched her scarf like armor, her backpack slung loosely over one shoulder. The vast apartment felt foreign to her, too quiet, too polished. She looked around nervously. "Is this where rich people live?" she asked in a whisper. Ryan knelt beside her. "It is where you live now," he said gently. Her skepticism melted into wonder as he led her down the hall and opened the door to her new room. She froze in the doorway, wide-eyed. Slowly, she stepped inside, her small hands brushing over the books, the lamp, the walls. When she saw Rosie, her breath caught. She hugged the giraffe tight, burying her face in its fur. Then she turned to him with a whisper. "I think this was my room a long time ago." Ryan's throat closed as he nodded. "It was," he said softly. "I never forgot, I just added to it." That night they curled up on the couch with a blanket and a cartoon flickering on the television. Stella fell asleep halfway through, her head resting on his shoulder, her breath steady and warm. Ryan sat motionless, afraid to disturb the moment. The sound of her breathing was a lullaby he had not known he missed until now. The next morning, over pancakes, she looked at him with a shy smile. "Can I call you Dad now?" The fork slipped from his hand. His eyes filled with tears as he reached across the table for her small hand. "Please," he whispered. Her smile widened. "Okay, Dad," she said it again, testing the word on her tongue, then giggled. "It feels funny in my mouth." He laughed through his tears. "It feels like music in mine." The following months unfolded with cautious beauty. Ryan took her to the park, where golden leaves spun down from the ginkgo trees she remembered from her dreams. She tucked one into her sketchbook, declaring she would never forget that day. He promised her she would not. Together, they built a rhythm of visits, laughter, and new memories. Darcy remained present, and though the weight of the past lingered, there was no bitterness left in Ryan's heart. Only gratitude that his daughter was alive, that she was home again. 1 year later, he stood in his backyard beneath the tall maple tree, watching Stella twirl in her yellow scarf while family and friends gathered to celebrate her homecoming. A banner fluttered in the breeze. "Welcome home, Stella Harper." Ryan adjusted his tie nervously, though it was not a formal occasion. To him, it felt greater than any award he had ever received. Darcy approached quietly, her voice thick with emotion. "She looks like herself again." Ryan nodded. "She is herself," he replied, "for the first time in a long time." Stella laughed in the distance, her voice bright as sunlight. Ryan's eyes glistened as he whispered to himself, "This is the beginning." And for the first time in years, his heart believed it. There are stories that pass through our lives quietly, like shadows at dusk, and then there are stories that carve themselves deep into the heart, leaving us forever changed. Ryan Mitchell's journey was one of loss so profound it nearly broke him, of grief that stole the color from his days. He had resigned himself to a life of silence, of memories locked away in cedar boxes and nights spent wondering if he had failed his daughter. And then, in the unlikeliest of places, on an ordinary morning in a small bakery, he was given a miracle. The little girl in the red coat was more than a stranger. She was a reminder that hope never truly dies, even when we bury it beneath sorrow. Her whispered offer to trade her coat for a slice of cake opened a door Ryan thought had closed forever. When her sleeve slipped back and revealed the mark he once kissed on his baby girl's arm, the world shifted. Fate, or perhaps something greater, had placed Harper back in front of him, wrapped in a new name, a new life, yet carrying the same light he thought was gone. It was not an easy road. There were questions without answers, pain tangled with gratitude, and choices that demanded courage from everyone involved. But through it all, one truth rang louder than fear. Love endures. It endures years of separation. It endures brokenness. It endures the darkness of not knowing. Love finds its way back again and again. For Ryan, the reunion with his daughter was not just about recognition. It was about rebuilding, about teaching himself to believe in miracles once more. Every laugh, every question, every sketch she handed him was proof that healing is possible. And in the end, it was not money, not success, not awards that gave his life meaning. It was a child's voice calling him Dad. If this story has touched you, if it has reminded you that even in the hardest seasons, love can return in ways you least expect, then we invite you to stay with us. At Hidden Echo Stories, we bring you tales that stir the soul, stories of hope, resilience, and the power of human connection. Because sometimes all it takes is one story to remind us of who we are and what we are capable of when love leads the way. So if your heart beat a little faster listening to this tale, if a tear found its way to your cheek, or if you simply believe that miracles are worth holding onto, then do not let this be the end. Subscribe to Hidden Echo Stories and join us for the next journey, because there are more stories waiting to be told, stories that just might change you too.